Okay, hello there, everybody, and welcome. I said that these videos were going to come out, so now they're coming out. And we're learning more about the world and why China won't overtake the US as they planned. Let's see why they won't do it.
The United States is the undisputed world's greatest superpower. By every metric, be it financial,
Really?
economic, or military, the US seems to stand head and shoulders above the rest of the world.
That's true.
However, with the turn
yeah.
of this new decade,
It's like,
could the balance of power be shifting?
The Chinese
but
economy.
what would it go to?
It's far exceeded expectations and forecasts.
I don't know if it's China, but they were like talking about like there was gonna be a population collapse in one place because they lied about the birth rate and death rate of the people there. I don't know if it was Japan, Korea, China. I don't know where it was. It was one. I think it was Japan.
And is the highest reading since April 2012.
We've gotten so used to China being the leader, and
China's relentless rise. Not a problem as the economy doubled in value 4 times between 1980 and 2010.
That is a very, very impressive figure. China seems to leave everyone else behind.
After several decades of being the top dog, the major question in international relations is now, is the United States' run as the world's greatest superpower coming to an end? Ray Dalio made an in-depth video on this topic titled The Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. In it, he talked about how the world order is changing and that China is coming out on top. He's not alone in this thinking either. Many analysts agree seeing
In India, I could see India will overtake the US by economically by 2075. We gotta start producing some stuff that will actually be
rise in
sold.
China ready to catch up or even
But
surpass
that's a
the
long
United
time.
States.
Actually, before we even reach 2075, let's hope we make it to like next year without a world war starting. Mind you, China are helping Russia, or we're helping Russia. Were you? I mean, they were buying oil from them. I guess that's as much help as they were getting so far. But they were helping them get Ukraine. I guess I don't know.
In the near future. Several metrics have been presented to show how this will be possible and how Beijing will continue to grow at the unprecedented rate it grew in the last few decades. In fact, for many, the question is not whether China will become the strongest global superpower, but just how soon. However, from my perspective, this is not only impossible, but the idea that Beijing will surpass Washington is based on a closed circuit of thought. In this video, I'll explore just why China will never surpass the US, the reasons for it, and my backing for this. This is a game of global superiority, and though the US in recent years seems to be in somewhat of a decline, it is still head and shoulders above China. Let me tell you why. And as we dive into the deep issue of economic, military, and soft power dominance, please feel free to like this video to counter the CCP bots that often do not approve of anything anti-China. I really appreciate your support. All right, now let's get back into it. China is largely viewed as the only country with the raw potential to become a true global peer to the United States.
Really? Not Russia?
This mostly comes as a result of its economic growth, which is projected to grow to surpass the USA.
Really?
To China's credit, the immense level of growth the nation has experienced in the last half-century is nothing short of miraculous. China has grown from being a struggling nation to being up there with the rest of the world. Among the major talking points, China's GDP is always used as the primary point. And true to form, China's GDP and GDP growth is a thing of beauty. The GDP annual growth rate in China averaged 9% from 1989 to 2022. It does not take a genius to realize just how insane this level of growth is. I mean, it's almost impossible for modern economies. This is primarily why China is viewed as a miracle country. By the same metric, the GDP annual growth rate in the United States averaged 3.13% from 19.
Damn, it looks like we're falling down. Look, at 1.9 GDP. What's GDP though? I don't know what GDP is. So that's not helpful. I don't think he told us, did he? Was that not
The GDP annual growth rate in China averaged.
I mean, I went from 6.8 negative 6.2. 2.9.
Averaged 9% from 1989 to 2022. It does not take a genius to realize just how insane this level of growth is. I mean, it's almost impossible for modern economies. This is primarily why China is viewed as a miracle country. By the same metric, the GDP annual growth rate in the United States averaged 3.13% from 1948 until 2022.
Product.
When you compare these values,
one of the most common GDP, which stands for gross domestic product, it is often cited in newspapers, on the television news, and reports by government central banks and business community. It has become a widely used reference for the health of a nation and global economics. I wonder what our shit is looking like now. I'm pretty sure inflation is crazy, right?
And the forecasts that are given, it's easy to see why Chinese dominance has become a large talking point. When you bring in the actual gross domestic product value for the nations, they paint a different yet similar story. China's GDP is worth just under $18 trillion according to official data from the World Bank. Just so you know how humongous this GDP value is, it represents 7.94% of the entire world economy.
Damn.
That's a lot.
You know, when he said that, I need you to show me a pie chart, because I don't know how much every other country has, right? So he said 7.9, and then I'm like, okay, that could be a lot, or it could be a little, depending on how much everybody else has. I'm guessing it's a lot. It might be like in the middle, right? Or I say like in the middle, but like, I mean, like, you know how there's a lot, and then there's a lot middle, and then there's a lot low? Basically that. They're probably a lot middle than a lot.
Despite this, China still falls shy of the 25.46 trillion US GDP value. Even with this massive difference, many believe that when you factor in the GDP growth rate and the relative GDP difference between the two, China's on pace to surpass the USA.
Wait, so it's not like the USA is going down right now, but okay then. So they're basically saying that China's just increasing a lot more than USA. So it's like basically USA is increasing by 1, and they're increasing by 3, and by like years 75, their 3 will pass our 1, and then they'll be the top. Okay.
Well, I think not. And let me explain why. You see, GDP is not the end-all be-all factor.
Of course.
In fact, it's largely misleading when it's used in this context by those who are adamant that China's economy will surpass that of the USA. To start off with, the GDP measurement was originally designed to measure mid-20th century manufacturing economies. This was a time when manufacturing and industrial booms largely determined how developed a nation was, and how much growth the nation was experiencing. Now, however, GDP estimates can be misleading, because the more knowledge-based and globalized a country's production is, the more its GDP underestimates its economy's true size. To counter this, and to come up to modern times, the UN developed a new statistic, and using it, you can see just how China's power is inflated when we talk about GDP. This new method is called inclusive wealth. In a nutshell, inclusive wealth represents economists' most systematic effort to date to calculate a state's wealth in a way that is better than GDP. It basically solves the biggest problem that comes with only using GDP. You see, the problem with GDP is that it measures a flow, whereas inclusive wealth measures a stock. To put it plainly, as one person said, gauging an economy by its GDP is like judging a company by its quarterly profits, without ever peeking at its balance sheet.
That makes sense.
In this context, China's quarterly profits are high, but the balance sheet, well, it's not as deep as their Washington counterparts. Because inclusive wealth measures the pool of resources a government can conceivably draw on to achieve its strategic objectives, it's the more useful metric when thinking about geopolitical competition. So you get it now? When calculating
This is
I get it. I forgot to check if I'm recording. If I'm not recording, I'm finding somebody, and I don't know who that somebody going to be.
Consider several things. Firstly, you take manufactured capital. That includes roads, buildings, machines, and equipment. Secondly, you take human capital, which is the level of skill, education, and health of the population. Lastly, you consider the natural capital of a nation. When you work with these 3 factors, you can get a more accurate picture of the value of a nation's economy and its strength. When you calculate the United States' inclusive wealth, it comes to almost $144 trillion.
Dang.
China's, in comparison, is $32 trillion.
Damn. They
This
got a
is
long way to
less than
go.
a quarter of that of the USA. We don't have to religiously stick to semantics and the minuscule figures, but this figure alone tells you that China is far behind the USA. As much as it may be developing faster, what the US has in the bank is significantly more already. It's a lot like getting a job right out of college that pays slightly more than your dad's job. Yeah, you might earn more now, but he
he had
still has more
longer?
wealth overall.
Yeah.
The time factor cannot be understated. So, now that we've debunked the GDP frame of reference that's used to overestimate China, let's move on to some of the major reasons why China simply will never surpass the US economy. At least, not anytime soon. One of the things that cannot be understated when rating nations is the technological prowess that a nation holds. This is a major advantage that can allow them to be on the cusp of cutting-edge ideas,
That's
technologies,
true. That's
and
crazy.
weapons.
They're
One
making
can say
Iron
that
Man
it
suit?
is this strength in technological achievement that allowed the US to put an end to the Second World War by developing technology that the enemy at that point didn't have. When comparing the US and China, well, it's a no-brainer. China is significantly outclassed.
Really?
One cannot
Significant?
begin to understate the
Significant?
technological
Are they not
disparity
even
between
close?
these two nations. That is why when the US does something like this, China suffers pretty badly, as it is right now.
Washington has imposed sweeping controls on exports of semiconductors, also known as microchips, to Beijing.
And that's had a dramatic effect. Every American engineering executive involved in the chip industry in China has resigned effectively immediately.
I think this is another sign of the Biden administration ratcheting up the pressure on China.
There are now fears this competition for technology may intensify an already fragile.
Wait, wasn't I'm not sure though. I'm gonna just say this. But didn't they do that so then instead of having a bunch of companies overseas supplying them with jobs, they would have more jobs for people here? At least that's what I thought it was, or something like that, right?
Relationship.
I made a video about this topic a while back. Take a look at it for more in-depth information. In a nutshell, the Biden administration has banned the selling of US-made microchips or any microchips using US intellectual property to China.
Oh.
Given that a
I was
vast
completely wrong
majority
then.
of microchips in China involve either US IP or US processes, China is in a bind. By lagging behind in this sector, it's being punished by Biden. In fact, many people don't know that China is vastly inferior to the US when it comes to technology.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
The picture that many see is of China exporting millions of high-tech goods.
Yeah, because like almost damn near everything made in China. Like dead ass everything got the tag made in China. PlayStation 5s were so limited because they were made in China, shipped over. What else? A bunch of stuff were limited during COVID and whatnot because it was made in China.
And they seem to credit China for all of that. And this is wrong. You see, in a world of globalized production, half of all Chinese exports consist of what economists called processing trade, meaning that parts are imported into China for assembly and then exported afterwards.
Oh, wow.
So China
So they only
is
put stuff
great at
together?
assembling things and being a manufacturing hub.
So that's what
But
they
the
meant by made in
technology
China.
and the intellectual property, well, they always come from elsewhere. If you want to get a better gauge of this, take a look at this World Bank data on payments for the use of intellectual property. With over $128 billion in payments received, the United States is far and away the leading source of innovative technologies. China, on the other hand, received a respectable but measly $11 billion in payment. Let me break this down. These are amounts that are paid to each country as a fee or commission for the use of each country's intellectual property.
So basically copyright?
It's basically people saying thank you for showing us the light. And in that regard, many, many, many more people are thanking the US. I mean, you gotta thank the best, right? Another good indicator of the technological gap is the number of so-called triadic patents registered in the United States, Europe, and Japan. In 2012, nearly 14,000 of these patents originated in the United States, compared to just under 2,000 in China.
Wait, who is this? What's this? Is this like everybody together, and then it shows like everything or all their patents? Damn, Japan up there for real? So then you would stack all this together, and then it would equal this, right? Yeah, it says total right here.
The technological and knowledge superiority trickles down to everything, actually. The distribution of highly influential articles in science and engineering, well, they tell the same story, with the United States accounting for almost half of these articles, more than 8 times of China's share. So does the breakdown of Nobel Prizes in physics, chemistry, and physiology or medicine. Since 1990, 114 have gone to US-based researchers. China-based researchers have received 2. What this shows, in a nutshell, is that the US is far more advanced in the technological sector. This allows them to create cutting-edge tech that is more progressive
Technology
and more
is
efficient.
damn near
This tech
everything
prowess
now.
largely extends to military prowess as well. In this regard,
sense.
the US is leaps and bounds ahead of China,
Yeah.
and technology has a huge role to play in this. For example, the United States spends more on defense than the next 9 countries combined.
Yeah, I seen that.
A good portion of this budget goes towards research and development purposes.
That I
In
did not know.
2012, the United States spent over $79 billion on military research and development. This figure is more than 13 times what China spent in the same period.
Damn.
This
Russia
funding
below
of tech
China?
that can be used to boost the power of a nation cannot be underestimated. We are not just talking about 2012 either.
To the adventurers of Azeroth, to heroes of far-off realms, to anyone desperate to...
Another thing I got with this is that, you know how they're always like, oh yeah, we'll send missiles over to your place, right? Like, since we're spending so much on research, that research must have provided some certain results. Can't those results like just EMP the rocket? Like, say bro, let's say Russia sent over like 16 rockets, right? Right. And then they're all to different places, but they all leaving at the same point, and we're knowing where they're going to be in a cluster together before they split up. Can't we send like one rocket up there that has an EMP and like destroy them other rockets? Like, I don't know if we have EMPs. I'm pretty sure EMPs are real, right?
China
Let me
is
know.
decades behind the US in terms of creating structures that allow for the procuring and manufacture of advanced weapon systems. As time goes on, these systems become more complex, and the gap between the nations widens. Like, let's just use jets as an example to highlight this. Back in the 60s, it took just 5 years to develop a jet aircraft.
Damn.
By the 90s, that number had become 10 years due to the sheer complexity of these jets. Today, it takes 15 years to design and build the most advanced fighter aircraft.
For
And
other
military
places, or
satellites can
just
take even longer.
everybody?
Yeah, you heard that right. 15 years. So even if another country managed to build the scientific and industrial base to develop the many types of weapons that gives the United States command of the commons, there would be a long lag before it could actually possess them. That is the position that China now finds itself in. The Pentagon simply has resources and infrastructure in place that the Chinese do not possess. And even if they do, we all know the US is obsessed with their military. The Pentagon is not going to be sitting idle while China advances. China's lagging technological power is one of the reasons why they can't surpass the US, either economically or as a de facto global leader. So it's no wonder that China has resorted to things like this, allegedly.
Self-espionage.
So it's no wonder
How Beijing backed hackers acquired sensitive U.S. tech using its F-35 fighter jet. They should have said how old the fighter jet was.
that China has resorted to things like this, allegedly.
Back in China, the debt bubble is about to burst. As we speak, a crisis is spiraling.
Chinese mortgage holders have been withholding repayments en masse.
Infrastructure debt is piling up, and China is increasingly juggling to keep up appearances.
China is looking at a state-owned enterprise with $850 billion in debt that it can't repay.
Its debt tripled to a staggering $43
Damn, tripled? That's
trillion.
wild.
That's almost 3 times the size of its economy.
Isn't that crashing?
This point is one I found especially fun when I was researching this topic. Do you know the long-running joke about the US debt problem on the internet? Well, it turns out that China is in hotter waters. After keeping things under wraps, as Beijing is known to do, the debt issue has escalated to a point where it needs addressing. For starters, Beijing has begun to take steps to sort out its troubled property sector. It has announced a new financial stability law that, according to the vice chair of the People's Bank of China, aims to control risk. Such measures may offer temporary relief, but they can't address China's deeper economic troubles and their reflection in financial markets. Put simply, debt is a serious problem in the country. All this was exposed through the real estate market fiascos. This is because the real estate market made up 30% of China's GDP, and it is what mainly powered the Chinese economy. But the debt explosion, triggered by the bankruptcy of the China Evergrande Group, was catastrophic. The damage that it caused trickled down to the local governments, who, up until then, had made up for budgetary deficits by selling land to real estate developers. With that no longer an option, a vacuum was left in the system, resulting in the deterioration of local government finances. This has served to highlight the disparity of wealth between the wealthy coastal region and the poor western region, leading to social unrest. Don't think I'm exaggerating this either, no. Counting it wholly, that is debt inclusive of public, private, and in all sectors of the economy. The figure amounted to the equivalent of $51.9 trillion. And in case you didn't know, that's a lot. Just to put that into perspective, that is thrice the size of the GDP that we were talking about earlier. That is extreme. In fact, this is the highest level recorded in the 27 years since Beijing first began to track such statistics. This Chinese debt now far exceeds the burdens facing the United States. In fact, relative to GDP, it's 40% higher than America's. Yikes, that's bad. And when you add in the economic statistics that say that more developed countries, such as the United States, because of their greater relative wealth, tend to have higher relative debt burdens. This is because they can support them more easily than less developed economies, like China. So the US, as bad as it is for Washington, is still in a far better position than Beijing. Remember what I said about the disparity of wealth between the rich and the poor? Well, China, just as you would expect from the CCP, is attempting to solve the issue of inequality through force. Xi's push for common prosperity will ultimately undermine the nation's growth potential, as it will surely hurt the validity of Chinese corporations. Private enterprises in China are rapidly becoming public under state control. The tale of Jack Ma, Alibaba, and the A&T Group is a clear example of this. The CCP's style of operations is fixated on some form of Chinese-style capitalism. This might have worked earlier, but as a nation grows and companies expand, all I see coming from this is a negative impact on the economy. All I see is inequality worsening in China, resulting in more of this.
A massive protest over frozen bank deposits turned violent in
China, where economic woes have pushed people to the streets. People across China are not happy, and their anger exploded on the streets for several days.
Go on strike, remove the dictator and national traitor Xi Jinping.
Protests at the main Foxconn factory in China, people wielding sticks, smashing surveillance cameras, and demand.
Okay, let's say they do remove him, then what? Like, they remove him from power, then what? You guys are still in debt, so just wondering.
Ending an end to COVID lockdowns
it's not like you remove him and then all the debt is gone. No, the debt is still there. You just remove the dude who caused the debt.
To openly call for the resignation of Chinese leader Xi Jinping.
China has more trouble brewing at home, and this will only serve to cripple it. Aware of this, the CCP has designated zero COVID, economic growth of 5%, and debt reduction as its three main policy objectives.
Damn.
Already all of this is in disarray as there are protests against zero COVID. The nation has failed to meet the 5% target by almost half, and that debt is ballooning. It's honestly a mess. Rectifying all this is going to take time.
You know what I wonder? Like, since there's so much debt, how does it affect like regular people? Right? Hold on. I'm trying to find out what zero COVID is, but it's not saying. But like, how does it affect like them people? Like, I can see them marching. is it like here where the inflation is like getting crazy, or is it like if you can, I don't know, bro. Like I'm curious, how high can inflation get before people just don't pay shit? Like if everything is so out of the water, like crazy, stupid high, right? They're like, I'm not paying for that. Like imagine your house, like for you to live in a house, it's like 1,500 right now. Let's just say 1,500. I just picked the random number. Like 3 bedrooms, 1,500, 1 bathroom. I guess you get a pool maybe, about 1,500 a month, and then you work minimum rate, minimum wage, I guess, or you work. I don't know, bro. I mean, with minimum wage, you can't even get a house or 3 bedroom house. So take that back. I mean, I guess that's how it would be like, huh? Bro, where am I going with this? I'm trying to think, but I can't think, and it's pissing me off because I can't think. So basically, regular person works minimum wage. It's like 13. I don't even know what minimum wage is in China. Do they even have minimum wage there? Let's just say it's 13.75. Isn't that what it is right now? I think 13.75, or is it 15? I'll say 13.75. I think it's 13.75. We'll go 13.75. They want to move into a house. Well, you know what? Forget it, bro. I'm done.
So, talk about China surpassing the US economically or otherwise, we'll have to take a back seat while Xi tries to blow out the raging fire in his backyard. But there is more.
Lack of soft power?
Have you ever heard of soft power?
No.
Well, it's something that the US has tons of and China severely lacks. Soft power can be defined as the capacity to influence other nations through the use of persuasion and attraction rather than coercion or force. Soft power relies on culture, arts, and science. Think of it as the finishing touch on a country's dominance or standing. You simply can't assume control of the world in this modern era unless you can dominate through cultural products. This is something that the US has mastered. Anywhere you go in the world, you see the marks of US culture in everything, from products to films and television series. But when it comes to China, the story is different. Despite having deep and long-time roots in history and time-honored traditions, China's culture is not largely adopted or paraded. I can even out an example of TikTok in this regard. Owing to a lack of Chinese content, it hasn't served as a window for distributing Chinese culture to the extent that it was intended.
That looks amazing. That looks fire.
In fact, the app has been dominated mainly by American culture. There is something that can be said about that too, but I'm going to save that for another video. A lack of soft power impacts economic growth negatively, but mainly, it does not give room to allow a country to be the global leader the way the US is. It is safe to say that China's soft power is in its infancy. In China's own continent of Asia, despite it being the most economically powerful nation in the region, other countries exude more soft power. Nations like South Korea and Japan quickly come to mind in this regard. Why does China not exude soft power? Well, much like North Korea, the answer is the same for both countries. The nation simply clamps down too much on creativity. It stifles creativity through the erection of a military state. The CCP endeavors to regulate speech unrelated to patriotism.
Is it South Korea or North Korea? Well, one of the Koreas, you can't even, Kim Jong-un or whatever, you can't even go there. You, like, bro, they tried to do documentaries on there. You can't go there without, like, getting special passports. You can't record nothing. Their internet is monitored. If they leave the state, they gotta come back, or it's bad, isn't it? At least there, I don't know.
Or everyday life.
At least that's what I've heard.
In fact, by censoring everything online, the CCP can dictate what they allow to flourish and what they don't. This picking and choosing by the top brass affects the nation in unimaginable ways. Put simply, if the channels of communication in China continue to be choked and censored, creativity will die out. Though Asian culture is now widely consumed in the West, Chinese culture's share of the market is minimal.
U.S. adult popularity.
Is now widely consumed in the West. Chinese culture's share of the market is...
Never heard of U.S. adult populate of anime. Never heard of. 11% of people never heard of anime? Heard of, no opinion. Okay. Like, never hearing of it is crazy. Hearing of it and not caring about it, okay, I could get that. But never hearing about it is very crazy. Very unfavorable. You hate anime? Bitch, anime is basically a TV show animated with better storytelling. That's what it is, honestly. Somewhat unfavorable, somewhat favorable, very favorable.
Is minimal at best. What this shows is China's inability to globalize itself. The CCP takes a look inward policy, and this insistence on doing everything the Chinese way itself is causing the country's soft power to languish. What this has resulted in is the eroding of the competitiveness of China and their company.
Hey yo, stop shooting zombies and get back to the facts.
I'm pretty sure that after the Alibaba and A&T saga, where the CCP let political motives suppress global financial records, all this holds a lot more weight than ever before.
America's global
Now look, this is not the first time in history someone has predicted the fall of America at the hands of a rising superpower. At some point in history, Japan was pegged to be the nation that would outpace the US in terms of its economy.
Really?
Since we're all here in the present reality, you can see that that was just a dream that never really happened. In my opinion, talk of China surpassing the US economy and overtaking the US as a global leader is exactly that. It's just talk.
I wonder what would be the closest state to that would be able to do it. Like, if there was one that would be able to do it, I wonder which one it would be, in his opinion, of course.
None of the metrics, when examined closely, seem to favor China's ascension over the US. Of all the reasons we've talked about today, we have yet to even touch on other key factors such as demographics.
Ooh.
China's population is already aging,
Yeah,
and the country
people
has yet to accumulate very much wealth. Astronomical expenses will be needed to make sure its aging population doesn't tip China into social unrest. The cost may be too much for China to handle. In fact, it will definitely be too much to handle if it's carried alongside the other factor.
Like some stuff, like some stuff like this, you just gotta wait for the old people to die. I know it sounds harsh, but like with people being strict like this, you just gotta dead ass wait for the old people to die and for change to happen. Like, you know how, like, I'm gonna use the NFL as an example. You know how, like, in the NFL, right, it's like 80 or like 90% black players, and then head coaches, it's like 10% or some shit like that. I don't know the exact percentage. Don't quote me on that. But it's like a really low amount of black head coaches, and one of the reasons they use as not being able to hire more black head coaches is that they can't really like go out to have dinner with them. They're not familiar with them, right? And for that to change, basically, you basically need the old people who have held on to the team since like 80 plus years, 70, 50 plus years. You basically need them to die out. And then their sons or grandsons who have grew up around more diverse population who don't really feel weird around different populations or different cultures and whatnot. What's that going? Who don't feel weird around different culture, hire more black head coaches or more diverse people, right? So that's what I think this is basically. Like, for very strict places like China and South Korea or North Korea, whichever one it is, you just gotta dead ass wait for the old people to die, and then the new ones, the new people who come into power, hopefully they're more open-minded, and yeah.
My point is that I can make another video that's just as long with solid reasons as to why China is not in a position to surpass the US just yet. Between the CCP's intrusiveness, horrible foreign policy, social instability, and a loss of a competitive edge on global markets, China is in a bind. When you put all these together, it's hard to imagine a future that puts China above the US. For now, our discussion should be whether China will survive its current dilemmas, and if it does, how will it be by the end of it all? Only after these in-house issues are resolved can we revisit this China over the US question. For now, it seems that America's dominance will live to see another decade as the undisputed strongest global superpower. If you enjoy my videos, it might surprise you to hear, but you're probably not getting to watch all of them.
Yeah, subscribe.
That's because every so often one of my videos gets restricted and demonetized by YouTube. Like this one about the CCP's occupation of Tibet, or the one about...
See, look. I fuck with this dude. Like, you guys fuck with me, right? So we all gonna subscribe to each other. You guys gonna subscribe to me and subscribe to Business Basics, and then I'm gonna subscribe to him because I like his content, and you guys like his content while watching me react to his content. So let's all be one big happy family and subscribe and follow each other on everything that we own. But like, subscribe. Oh wait, let me check out the comments. From the U.S., the first time I really looked into geopolitics, all the voices predicted China to be the greatest world power. There was a reason to support that idea, but in recent years it is clear that China has essentially run out of energy mismanagement, demographic collapse, huge international dependencies, unable to feed and power itself. It is hard to find any single area where China has beat the US. China's GDP growth has been impressive, but now it isn't good. Random commenter on YouTube. Oh wait, I didn't mean to click on it.
The United States.
I lived in China for over a decade ago. During Hu Jintao's presidency, it was quickly apparent to me that there was not a solid foundation to build prosperous society in China. They plowed so much money into white elephant projects. What is that? Shiny statue projects like 5G and green tech and real estate. At the same time, a huge portion of their population outside and inside of their first tier cities lived in some pretty crushing conditions with no way out. There's no safety net or history of civic or civil engagement from everyday citizens. The whole place is a ticking time bomb. And there are reasons why rich Chinese people do so much to squirrel away their resources and families in more stable places than have more stable futures. Even if China's economy became larger than the US, they still wouldn't be able to stabilize their society enough through the bad times as well as the good in order to not implode on themselves. Really? Okay, bro, I don't feel like reading anymore. But like, subscribe. See you guys later. Hope you have a good day or night, and bye. Remember what I said? I subscribe to him, so you guys subscribe to me because we all like each other's content. Bye.